All right, how to read a quilt pattern. I pulled a few different out that we can go through. We'll start with one of ours. This is Buffalo Stars, that is for beginners. And we just released this one. So up here, you'll see the different fabric requirements for what you want to do as far as size. So let's go off of throw. So you need a light, medium, and dark, and then it tells you how much you need of each. And then when it comes to cutting instructions, you'll come down to the throw size. And so we have a light value, we have a more light value, medium, and dark value here. So you would follow your light fabric that you got up here. You would press it out and iron it, and then cut 7 strips that are 5.5 by width of fabric. So when you see the WOF, that's width of fabric, that is off of the bolt. So if you go to the store and they open it up and they cut you a strip like this, you're gonna take it home and you're gonna cut this way. This is your width of fabric. So you would cut, if it says 7 strips of 5.5, you would measure over 5.5 and then cut that width like that. So for this particular one, you're just gonna cut those 7 strips, set those aside. You also need 3 strips that are 8.25 by width of fabric. So then you'll measure over again 8.25 and cut that width of fabric. And then you'll sub-cut it, which means take one of those strips and cut it again into 10 squares of 8.25 by 8.25. So you'll take that long strip that you cut and you'll probably turn it sideways, and then you'll cut 8.25 to make squares like that. Now this one uses yardage. This one uses a jelly roll. So if you look at the back, if we do throw, you're gonna need 14 of those jelly roll strips. So you know, jelly rolls come in like a big bundle. You're gonna take 14 of those. And then you also need 3 yards of whatever background fabric you want. Now this particular one, I also put in directions if you wanted to do it scrappy. So I did a rainbow one where the whites are actually scrappy colored fabric, and so it looks like a rainbow like this. And then all of these little ones here, those were white. So I did like a reverse value kind of thing. So on this particular pattern, and if you go like this, you'll see I also put in scrap busting directions. So you're gonna have to have individually cut things. So those are more scrappy. You can just cut those from your scraps. If you wanted to do these ones with the jelly rolls, you're just gonna cut, if you have yardage, you're gonna have 14 strips that are 7.5 inches wide by that long width of fabric. And then it tells you here how to like sew them together. So this would be 1 jelly roll strip and then 1 piece of that background fabric. So those are 2 of our beginner patterns there. We have almost all beginner patterns. These are the paper ones, and so they come booklet style in a little baggie like this. But we also have PDF download if you want to do that. So let me show you some other examples of how other writers do theirs. So this is a book, Fat Quarter Workshop by Stephanie Sebbing. She is from Quilt Addicts Anonymous. You can also check out her website. I used to do some filming for her, and I love all of her patterns. They are beginner friendly, and they are all made for fat quarters. So her directions here will tell you fat quarters, and then you might need some extra yardage for some of them, but not all of them. So her directions, she'll have the yardage here, and then she doesn't do hers in a table. She just kind of writes it out. So from each of those fat quarters, so let's say you're doing a throw, each of those 12 fat quarters, you would cut 3 strips that are 5.5 by 21. So fat quarters are 21 inches, and you'll just kind of treat that like your width of fabric off of a yardage kind of thing. And then you're gonna cut 3 strips that are 5.5. So if this is your fat quarter, you're gonna cut 3 strips like that. And I have a couple of her books. Definitely check these out. I also have a ton of her PDF patterns that I've just printed out as well. Now let's look at another one. This is from Chris Marchini, a good friend of mine at rosecityoriginals.com. And he does a lot of scrappy ones like this that involve fat quarters. I've actually done this twice for my daughters, and it was a lot of fun. But his isn't in a specific table like mine is. It goes like this to show you each fat quarter. So it will show you, you know, you need a 6.5 row, 6.5 row, and a 4.5 row. So you would cut 4 of those, 4 fat quarters into this. So he kind of provides an illustration. So that can be helpful if you're new, because, you know, if you're not great with written instructions, you can see it better. And so you'll want some that are green, some that are red, some that are white. And then the illustration also shows you how to label them, because his patterns need a lot of labeling. So he also has on his website, he just launched some little sticky tape that will help you write down what the letters are and how many of them you have. All right, let's check out another one. This is from Lo and Behold Stitchery, who I love. I have tons of their patterns. I keep the majority of my patterns in a binder, and then I have page protectors to keep them all nice. So that's a nice storage option. I have a couple of these binders. So Lo and Behold Stitchery, this is one that I just did. If you scroll back a little bit, you'll see that I was hand sewing stuff onto here. So my mom made the top, and then I did all the quilting and binding. And so this particular one, I would maybe say is for beginners if you are good with half square triangles. And I would not do the baby one because they are very, very tiny. You end up cutting them into like 2 inches or 2.5 inches. I'd probably go bigger, because then they're going to be bigger for you. So this one, she has her colors all laid out, and she'll show you what the color is, so you can kind of can coordinate. And then when it, this also includes the cutting instructions. So she just tells you, like, you're gonna have a 1/4 yard or 1 fat quarter, or sorry, fat eighth. This is a fat eighth. And then she just says cut 2 6-inch squares. So she doesn't necessarily tell you how to cut that. It's a fat eighth is already kind of width of fabric, and you would just subcut that into 6 squares. And so that's pretty much the same all the way down. And then when you get to the background, she has a little bit more. So you're gonna have 2 1/4 yards, and you're gonna cut that into 6 by width of fabrics. So like 6 of those rows that are width of fabric. And then you're gonna subcut it into 40 6-inch squares. So she does hers kind of how I do mine. And I think of the designers that I buy from, I say that's pretty typical. And I think those kind of things are really helpful for beginners. So if you happen to be in a quilt shop and you can thumb through them, I would look for something like that, just if you're starting. All right, let me show you one last one that I did for my sister as a wall hanging. And I think it's good for beginners as far as technicality. It's not anything really difficult, but the cutting instructions were a little, I don't know. So this is a quilt by Susie Quilts, and I love her patterns, don't get me wrong, but for beginners, I think it might be a little confusing because they just kind of have, I did the baby one. So they have your fabric requirements here, but then they just kind of tell you, you need 18 of these, and these are the half square triangles that you need. And then the cutting instructions, like over here, it just says cut 18 5-inch squares. Cut 6 of these, 12 of these, 9 of these, 18 of these. So it doesn't really tell you what width of fabric you need to be cutting. So you're gonna have to kind of estimate that yourself. So if you need 5-inch squares, I would cut 5 inches off of that width of fabric. If you have a 1/2 yard, I would cut 5 inches. And then it also says you need 4.5 inches. So I would cut 4.5 inch of width of fabric. So I think it's doable. I definitely think it's doable. I think that's a good beginner pattern. It's not anything too difficult, but you're gonna have to kind of take your time with those cutting instructions and really map out how you're gonna do it. So I hope that helps.